What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our top 5 boom or bust running backs for the 2021 fantasy football season. Basically, these are guys that could be league winners or on the other side of the spectrum, be absolute disappointments in terms of where you drafted them and your expectations. So make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? Who else would you put on this list, along with any other questions you guys might have? I'll do my best to answer them all. And lastly, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. And while you're there, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Everything you want at a great value. Details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And you can see we have got our list of running back rankings and ADPs pulled up. Now, this is PPR based, just keep that in mind. But with that being said, we kick it off with one Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. As you can see, he comes in as the number 12 running back, which technically qualifies him to be an RB1. He's being confidently drafted in the second round, so you're going to have to pay up to get him. Now, why is he a boom candidate? Pretty simple. Mixon, a guy that's very talented. We've seen it before, and he's been an RB1 before. Now, without Giovanni Bernard this season, we're also potentially looking at the biggest volume and just success, statistically speaking, in Joe Mixon's career up until this point. Without Giovanni Bernard, we could see that aspect of Joe Mixon's game that, we kind of know is there. We've seen the success, but it's been limited. Him being utilized as a pass catcher. And if he unlocks that, that's how you transition to being a lock in the first round at the running back position. Kind of putting yourself in the names of an Ezekiel Elliott, guys like a Dalvin Cook, maybe an Aaron Jones type. So those are all things to love about Joe Mixon. But the bust potential, we have to mention it. First and foremost, yes, the Bengals are probably going to be a team that are scoring a lot of points, but we have to ask ourselves, how are they going to do it? Well, unfortunately, they're still a team that I believe is developing defensively, which means they're also going to be giving up a lot of points. And in those scenarios, when you give up a lot of points, potentially fall behind quickly, no matter who your quarterback is, great, Joe Burrow is back, but you're going to have to play catch up usually through the air. That means wide receivers, that means tight ends, and a lot of times the rushing attack is kind of left by the wayside. So in those scenarios, that might limit Joe Mixon's success on the ground. Obviously, that's a ding for him. On top of this, I think Joe Mixon, from this perspective, in terms of worrying about a good running back's offensive line, is the perfect example. Last season, Joe Mixon, when healthy, let's point that out, was in a pretty similar situation with the same quarterback, Joe Burrow, when he was healthy as well. He wasn't succeeding. Other than one big blow-up game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, Joe Mixon was struggling. The offensive line was a big reason why. Yes, there have been some upgrades, but they haven't been substantial for the Cincinnati Bengals. The fact that they passed on somebody like Penei Sewell in the draft, that's a big red flag in my opinion. And if Joe Mixon, struggles because of a poor offensive line, I think we could see shades of last season, even prior to that, years gone by, where Joe Mixon is a guy that becomes hard to trust. And that's one of the worst things. Yes, volume is great for a running back, but only when it's quality volume. When you're just banging for, 1, 2, 3 yard gains, and probably 3 yard gains being optimistic, then that's not what you want for your running back, because that slows down the game rushing wise, and teams are going to be more prone to just passing the football. Joe Mixon, the rushing upside goes down, and it's completely a trickle down effect, which we believe, again, could be that kind of thing that holds back Joe Mixon. So from that perspective comes the bust part of it. And really the reason why, one way or another, we have a tough time pinning, is Joe Mixon going to be somebody that completely succeeds or struggles at his current ADP? But let's move on to another guy here in DeAndre Swift that I think could be the poster boy of this category. When I say boom or bust, obviously, we know the potential, we know the downside, but it also kind of means a guy that we struggle to pinpoint how they will perform. And I think Swift is that perfect example because, a couple months ago when, we didn't have Anthony Lynn in the picture before Jamal Williams joined the team, DeAndre Swift was a guy that we were probably drafting in the second round of drafts, especially PPR formats, because Swift showed us last season like he was the best running back on that Lions team. And the Lions did a tremendous job of upgrading their offensive line. They've lost a lot of pass-catching targets this team has. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, cutting Brashad Perriman. Like, they've got other weapons. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson. They've brought in some other outside talent as well. But, like, DeAndre Swift figures to be a prominent, role in this offense in terms of being a pass catcher, which makes him even more valuable as a running back. So that, coupled with the fact that, again, he's the main running back here, and Jamal Williams technically shouldn't be a guy that's pushing him for RB1 duties, which means his volume should be a lot higher than it was last season. All things that we absolutely love about DeAndre Swift. Like, maybe in a perfect scenario, he could be like a poor man's Austin Eckler, something like that. But the bust potential, man, all of a sudden, these last couple of weeks, these, maybe even last couple of months, days, whatever the case might be, Swift is a guy that's been plummeting in terms of ADP, in terms of rankings. Here, he's ranked as the 15th overall running back. But nowadays, you can get DeAndre Swift like in the 4th round, maybe even later. Depends how really desperate your league is for running backs and how prone they are to taking risky guys, because I do think DeAndre Swift falls in that category. Swift is a guy now that's been dealing with a groin issue pretty much all preseason, all camp, and that's prevented him from playing, getting reps with his team. And in fact, his status for week 1 up in the air. With the addition of Jamal Williams, this is a guy that in Green Bay was the backup to Aaron Jones, a capable backup there. I think he can do the same here. In fact, right now, I've said that given the question marks with DeAndre Swift, I would probably draft Jamal Williams over Swift, given their ADP differences. That, coupled with the fact that coaches have said, yeah, we might go with a hot hand approach here. Jamal Williams can absolutely do it all. That just absolute red flags in my head. So as much as there is upside for DeAndre Swift, the injury, the potential cost, again, depends, I would say, from league to league where he's being drafted. Could be as early as the 3rd round, could be in the 4th round, rarely in the 5th round. And then the presence of Jamal Williams, those are all things that worry me about DeAndre Swift. The perfect, best case scenario, he's a borderline top 12 running back. Worst case scenario, Jamal Williams potentially outproduces him. But let's move on to the 3rd running back on this list. We have got Mike Davis of the Atlanta Falcons. Davis here ranked as the 21st overall running back, a guy that I like for the Atlanta Falcons. I like him as somebody maybe like in the 5th round that you just add, and he can be a contributor for you, especially in PPR formats. The question is, even though he is the main running back for the Falcons, they haven't added anybody else, and he's coming off a year where he was a tremendous substitute for Christian McCaffrey. Those are probably the biggest, highlights, pros for him when talking his fantasy football upside. But in terms of bust potential, like you look at the Falcons, they're not going to be a run-first team. Yes, they've got a run-first coach, but, personnel-wise, they're not built that way. As long as Matt Ryan is still the quarterback for them, they're going to continue to be a pass-heavy team. They're usually top 5 in pass attempts, which is a good thing for Mike Davis. He's going to get work in the pass-catching area. But can he hold up for an entire season being the guy? And, a lot of times last season, the way he had his success was being utilized as a pass catcher, because that was kind of the role that the Panthers expected from McCaffrey. So whoever was kind of the running back to replace McCaffrey during those points in time where he was absent was going to be a focal point of this offense. But the Falcons, they're kind of built differently. Again, they've got Calvin Ridley. They've got a guy like Kyle Pitts that they just spent big draft capital on, guys like Russell Gage that we believe in. The offensive line, maybe to some extent, also a question mark. So theoretically, Mike Davis could be a guy that, is a very serviceable option in PPR options, high RB2 upside, but at the same time, a guy that's just a filler for the Falcons while they potentially, move on from Matt Ryan, while they find a younger, longer-term running back. Like, look at it from his perspective, what Todd Gurley did for them last season. The main reason why Todd Gurley was successful for certain points in time was because he had touchdown success. Like, you take that away and you saw how problematic starting Todd Gurley on a week-to-week basis was, and that could be another potential worry for Mike Davis. Moving on, though, here we've got Darrell Henderson as our fourth running back on this list, and Henderson is a guy that kind of, as of late, winds up on this list because after Cam Akers went down, we bought into Darrell Henderson, and why wouldn't you? I mean, the Rams hadn't added anyone else, and things were looking up for Darrell Henderson to be the guy for this team on a much improved offense with Matthew Stafford there. You know, the best offense that this team has had really as of late, a great defense, which would translate to more scoring opportunities. And like all these things, they still hold, don't get me wrong. But then Darrell Henderson has a thumb injury. All of a sudden, the status up in the air for week one, even though the expectation is he'll be ready. But anytime your starting running back, quote unquote, gets any type of injury, that's not a good thing. Then comes the trade for Sony Michel. Yes, Michel wasn't all that great for the Patriots these last few years, and some will say, you shouldn't worry about Michel. You didn't worry about him in New England prior to the trade. You shouldn't worry about him here. But at the same time, we can't ignore the reports, guys like Adam Schefter saying that the Rams could potentially use Sony Michel as the lead back. Now, personally, I don't believe that. I think that's absolute BS. I do think that Michel was kind of added because of, just need, because the Rams wanted to play it safe with that injury for Darrell Henderson and just getting a backup that has more experience than what they currently had. But we cannot ignore the fact that now Darrell Henderson's upside is limited in terms of volume, especially rushing-wise and touchdown-wise. Having Sony Michel in there does hurt. And for that reason, it's really tough to say what we're going to get from Darrell Henderson. Is it going to be a guy that, we were kind of projecting after that Cam Akers injury before anyone else was added? Or is it somebody that's kind of trending towards a potential running back by committee, which would be the worst case scenario? And then he kind of goes from a high-end RB2, potentially outside of the top 12, top 15 running backs, to a guy that you can't trust because every single week, similar to what it was for the Rams last year, you don't know who it's going to be for the Rams. And for that reason, he kind of belongs in this boom or bust category. But let's wrap this up with our last running back on this list. That is Damien Harris, somebody also affected, funny enough, by the Sony Michel trade. Damien Harris, obviously, for the Patriots, had a nice breakout year in 2020 and, got that running back role for himself, so much so that the Patriots decided to trade away Sony Michel. But the fact of the matter is Damien Harris is not a great pass-catching running back. Like, if he gets you 15 to 20 receptions on the season, that'll be probably the norm. Now, the departure of Cam Newton helps this because it's going to increase the upside rushing-wise, and it's going to help out Damien Harris in terms of vulture touchdowns big time. But the problem is here, other than Damien Harris being, kind of one-dimensional, as probably more a standard-suited running back, the fact of the matter that James White will always have a role in this offense because he's the pass-catching running back. So Damien Harris won't be an every-down running back. And also the emergence of Ramondre Stevenson, a guy that kind of takes what Damien Harris and James White do and meshes it together. A rookie running back that was ultra impressive in the preseason. Yes, it's the preseason, but he's a guy that earned his stripes, a guy that usually that's how Bill Belichick, the coach for the Patriots, says, all right, if you can get it done for me in the preseason, that's a good sign. We're going to get you more reps. We're going to get you more opportunities. And Harris, Stevenson, if he's a guy that can, have the rushing upside of a Damien Harris and the passing upside of a James White, I think he could potentially become somebody that the Patriots are using more and more often as the season progresses. Yes, he's a rookie, so probably his usage at the beginning part of the season won't be as high, but similar to other rookie running backs that are drafted and then prove that they can get it done, as the season progresses, they get more and more opportunities. And the fact of the matter is, the Patriots, these last couple of years, like, they haven't committed to one running back. Yes, they traded away Sony Michel, but like, even when he was there and he was successful, there was still like, Rex Burkhead. There was still Damien Harris, James White, Dion Lewis. There were other guys, and it was a running back by committee of sorts. And that's the worry again here, that the Patriots don't just hand the reins to Damien Harris. They continue to use this approach. And because of the current rise in ADP for Damien Harris, without Sony Michel, it might actually not be justified. But with that, we wrap up this breakdown of top 5 boom or bust running backs for 2021. As always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. And lastly, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. While you're there, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.